They thought I didn't hear. They thought I wouldn't find the emails. They didn't know I'd been recording. And they certainly didn't expect me to reveal everything in front of the fireplace, with the whole family seated wine in hand and betrayal burning brighter than the Christmas tree. This isn't just a story about family, it's about what happens when you're the one who gave everything time, love, money, only to find out you were just a placeholder. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, if you've ever smiled through the holidays while being secretly erased, if you've ever given more than you received and finally decided to stop, this story is for you. Because sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quietly take back the power they didn't think you'd ever notice was gone. Let me take you back to that December, to the string of lights, to the sound of betrayal, and to the night I turned the dining table into a courtroom. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you'll see how one woman's heartbreak became her blueprint for freedom. I had always loved decorating for Christmas. It was my quiet ritual, stringing lights along the railing, setting the table with pine-scented candles, baking cinnamon cookies from scratch. It made me feel like maybe this year I'd be seen, not just as the helpful daughter or the one who footed the bill, but as someone they were truly proud of. That December, the wind in Seattle bit through my gloves as I stood on a ladder outside my mother's porch, untangling the last strand of lights. I had just finished restoring the front facade weeks earlier, new cedar shingles, trim work by hand, all paid out of pocket. My mother had called it a gift to the family. I called it proof that I still believed in us. But belief has a way of breaking in silence. As I stepped down and cracked open the garden window to reach for a clip, I heard laughter inside. My sister Vanessa's voice carried like a dagger. Mom should really make her pay for the renovation and then cut her off. I'm sorry, but it's embarrassing to call Rachel family. My mother's voice followed, quieter but colder. We're already working on it. All the inheritance will go to you. I froze. For a moment, the lights in my hands didn't matter. The cold didn't matter because the foundation beneath everything I had built suddenly felt like it had crumbled. I had spent years proving myself. When Vanessa went to law school and married her high-rise husband, I stayed close. I built my business from the ground up, running 5 interior construction crews and paying for weekend getaways, new kitchen tiles, and mom's medical expenses. I never had a husband, never had children, but I was always available, always generous, because part of me believed that love could be earned with consistency and sacrifice. And that belief is what stung the most. I had marinated the prime rib for 3 days, polished the old family silver, and hemmed the Christmas tablecloth myself. Every detail was my quiet way of saying I'm still trying. But that day, hanging lights outside a home I didn't even own anymore in spirit, I realized how invisible effort becomes when people have already written you off. You can light up the entire house, but it won't matter if they've stopped looking at you. That's when something shifted inside me. Not rage, not revenge, just clarity. Like finally seeing the blueprint beneath a crumbling wall. I didn't drop the lights. I didn't storm in or slam doors. Instead, I reached for the cranberry sauce on the windowsill, placed it on the tray, and smiled. A smile so calm and controlled, even I was surprised by it. Because something had solidified inside me, not just resolve, but direction. I would still show up for Christmas. I would still pass the potatoes and pretend I didn't know. But I had already started preparing for something else entirely. Something not wrapped in ribbon, but bound by evidence. And that's where the next part of the story begins. Because when your world tilts, you can either collapse or quietly start measuring how to rebuild it on your own terms. It didn't happen all at once. It crept in over years, quiet, polite, and dressed up as responsibility. At first, I just helped out with the electric bill when Mom's pension check came late. Then I covered a weekend getaway for her birthday since Vanessa and her husband were tied up with work. Before I knew it, I was paying for family vacations, holiday meals, house repairs, and even my nephew's school laptop. No one ever asked outright, but they didn't have to. My wallet became the family's safety net, and somehow I became the provider no one acknowledged as one. Looking back, it was never really about money. It was about longing to belong. I thought if I kept giving one day, they'd say, "Rachel, we're proud of you." But praise never came. Instead, it was quiet entitlement. A thank you here, a you're a lifesaver there, but never real recognition. And certainly never inclusion. I remember one summer I paid for a full kitchen remodel for my mother, $18,000 of labor, and materials personally managed every step, and she told the neighbor Vanessa helped redesign it. It stung. Not just the dismissal, but the way it made me realize how replaceable I was. I wasn't Rachel the daughter. I was the convenience, the line of credit, the woman who could be counted on, but never truly counted in. And still I told myself, maybe next year. Maybe next holiday, next birthday, next family gathering, I'd be seen differently. It's a mindset many of us fall into, especially as women. Especially as daughters without families of our own, we're told love is shown through service, through sacrifice, through being the reliable one. But sometimes the role of the reliable one becomes a cage we decorate ourselves. The truth is, love given without boundaries often turns into obligation, and obligation rarely invites appreciation. That realization didn't come like lightning. It came like soft rain, each small moment revealing how I had stretched myself thinner and thinner, hoping someone would call it love instead of duty. When I overheard that conversation by the garden window, it didn't just hurt because of what they said. It hurt because it confirmed what I already knew. Deep down, they weren't grateful, they were comfortable. And comfort rarely changes until you move the ground beneath it. That's why the very next morning, I did something different. I didn't pay the landscaper's invoice for Mom's backyard like I had planned. I didn't Venmo Vanessa for her share of Christmas dinner supplies. I made coffee, opened a blank spreadsheet on my laptop, and started listing every dollar I had given to this family, every gift, every project, every quiet transfer I never counted before. Because before you can protect your future, you have to name the cost of your past. And that's exactly what I plan to do next. The renovation started like any other project, just new cabinets in the kitchen, but somehow it grew. A second bathroom to make holidays easier, new flooring in the hallway for safety, a full backyard redesign to match the neighbors. My mother had a way of making every request sound reasonable, even generous, and I, eager for closeness validation or maybe just a deeper connection, said yes to everything. I told myself I was building something real, something lasting. But I wasn't just rebuilding a house. I was distracting myself from the truth that no matter how many rooms I fixed, the foundation between us had been cracked for years. I poured myself into it. Every tile I laid with my own hands, every weekend I spent sanding floorboards instead of resting it, wasn't just labor, it was hope. A hope that if I could make this house beautiful enough, maybe we could become a family that felt like home again. But that was never the deal. I was the contractor, the financier, the invisible architect of comfort, and they were happy to keep it that way. I remember one afternoon crawling under the sink to fix a pipe in the middle of winter. My jeans were soaked, my fingers raw. Vanessa walked by in her tailored coat and said, "Still playing builder, huh?" She laughed. I didn't, because in that moment it hit me. I wasn't playing. I was investing. And the return silence. No gratitude, no ownership, no mention of me in the photo album caption that said, "Family holiday in our new kitchen." Sometimes we throw ourselves into projects not because we love them, but because we're afraid to sit still with what hurts. The renovation had become my emotional scaffolding. Every inch I improved outside was a way to avoid asking hard questions inside. Questions like, why am I the only one trying? What would happen if I stopped? And when I finally stopped, when I stood outside that window and heard what they really thought, I realized the walls I built weren't for them. They were the ones I needed to tear down for myself. That was the day I picked up my pen and wrote 3 words at the top of my spreadsheet: time, money, truth. And with that, I turned my attention from fixing houses to finally fixing the lie I had been living in. It started with something small, a locked laptop. My mother had never used a password before, not for her computer, not even for her phone. But one evening after dinner, as she stood humming in the kitchen, and I gathered dishes alone, I noticed it. A new lock screen, a digital wall where there used to be openness. That small change sparked something inside me. Not paranoia instinct, the kind of quiet alarm you develop after years of being close to someone who says all the right things, but whose actions hum at a different frequency. I waited until she went to bed. Then I tried her usual go-tos, her maiden name, our old dog's birthday, Vanessa's graduation year. It unlocked on the 3rd try. And just like that, the dam broke. The first thing I found was an email thread between her and Max, Vanessa's husband. Max, the sleek, sharp-tongued lawyer who always treated me like I'd just crawled out from under a crawl space. In the emails, they weren't discussing Christmas plans or family photos. They were talking property law, timelines, inheritance strategy, legal loopholes to remove someone from a shared estate without triggering backlash. The subject line on one email read, "Post-renovation asset division confirmed." I sat there alone in the dim light of the living room, heart thudding. The renovation I'd funded wasn't a gift. It was a phase in their plan. Worse still, another name kept popping up in the emails, Richard Blake, a name that stung with recognition. He wasn't just a financial advisor as she'd claimed once. He was my father's old colleague, his former best friend. And now, it seemed my mother's secret partner, romantic and financial. I dug deeper. Transfer records, memos, private messages saved in drafts. One note read, "Once funds are secured from Rachel's contributions, I'll move forward with the transition plan." That line alone undid years of narratives I had believed. The renovation wasn't just a distraction, it was a transaction. I was never rebuilding a family home. I was subsidizing an exit strategy. I opened a second document. It was a spreadsheet, clean, color-coded, precise. A list of every dollar I had given the family over the past 5 years, amounts pulled from shared travel plans, deposit records, even the time I wired funds for a surprise birthday party for my mother. Each contribution was cataloged like an invoice, but not for me, for them. They had been tracking me, calculating what they could extract, when it would be enough, and how to pivot once I had served my purpose. And that's when it became real. It wasn't just betrayal, it was betrayal with math. There's something shattering about seeing your generosity reduced to columns and dates. You start to question everything. Did they ever say thank you because they meant it? Or just because it kept me useful? I didn't cry that night. I didn't even rage. I did what builders do. I started documenting every screenshot, every thread, every transfer. I printed backups and stored them off-site, not because I was afraid, but because I finally understood what I was up against. Sometimes the truth doesn't come in a blow, it comes in receipts. And I wasn't about to let mine go unnoticed. The next morning, as I baked cookies and hummed the same holiday tunes my mother had the night before, I tucked the documents into a folder labeled Project Final Phase. Because I knew this wasn't just about salvaging money or recognition. This was about salvaging myself. And now the work would begin not with a hammer, but with a plan. There's something ironic about mixing cookie dough while plotting a quiet revolution. The cinnamon was warm in the air, the butter soft, and my hands moved with muscle memory scoop roll press. But my mind was a blueprint of something entirely different now. After everything I'd uncovered, I knew this wasn't the kind of betrayal I could solve with a conversation or a tearful confrontation. The truth didn't need an audience, it needed evidence. And I was done assuming the best without proof. That afternoon, I visited a small electronics shop tucked between a bike repair store and a dry cleaner. I walked out with 3 discrete audio recorders, 2 motion-triggered cameras, and a wave of guilt I tried to swallow with reason. I told myself, if they had nothing to hide, there'd be nothing to find. But it still hurt. There's a special kind of sorrow in realizing the people who raised you can't be trusted with your heart or your money. I hid the recorders in places that wouldn't be noticed, beneath the living room lamp, behind a vase in the hallway, and one tucked into the decorative books that lined the kitchen shelf. The camera went in Mom's study, angled just right, and then I returned to the kitchen, washed my hands, and finished frosting the sugar cookies. I even sang along to the holiday music playing on the radio like nothing had changed. Because outwardly nothing had, and yet everything had. I was no longer operating from hope, I was operating from clarity. I started taking mental notes during conversations, logging behavior patterns, collecting fragments that might seem insignificant on their own, but could, when pieced together, tell a fuller story. Like the way Mom would silence her phone every time Richard's name came up. Or how Vanessa's visits suddenly aligned with unexplained meetings in the city. Every detail was a brushstroke painting a picture I had only glimpsed before. There's power in paying attention, in choosing to observe when everyone assumes you're oblivious. I had spent so long being the quiet one, the one who didn't push back, who just paid and smiled. But now I wasn't silent. I was listening. One night, as I sat alone in the garage, my makeshift workshop lit by a single hanging bulb, I reviewed the first few recordings. My mother's voice calm and deliberate, discussing phasing me out after the renovation. Vanessa laughing about Rachel's little home improvement obsession, and Max ever strategic reviewing documents about how equity transfer would work best after January. I pressed pause and stared into the space around me. The shelves I had built, the toolboxes I had organized, the projects I had finished with my own hands. This was my world, my creation, and they were trying to carve me out of it like I didn't exist. But I did exist. I had records now, a voice, a story, and I wasn't going to be erased. I placed the recordings in a labeled folder on my drive and locked it with a password no one else knew. Then I exhaled, a deep, quiet, necessary breath. Because soon the house would be filled with people, and I would be ready. The morning of the party arrived quiet and cold, the kind of stillness that usually feels like peace. But that day it felt more like the calm before a storm I had engineered myself. I dressed carefully, choosing a crisp white blouse and a blazer I normally save for client pitches. Not because I wanted to look nice for my family, but because I wanted to step into that dining room, not as helpful Rachel or the single daughter with a tool belt, but as the woman who knew exactly what she was doing. I slid my tablet into my leather bag and tucked the folder of documents beneath the centerpiece I had arranged the night before. When guests arrived, everything looked picture perfect. My mother floated through the kitchen, directing last-minute touches with the same practiced grace she used to correct my posture as a teenager. Vanessa arrived next, Max at her side, both of them dressed like a corporate holiday card. Dad came last, a rare bottle of wine in hand, and that familiar air of distracted formality. He smiled when he saw me offered a kiss on the cheek and said, "The house looks incredible, Rachel." For a second, I almost let myself smile back, but I didn't come for compliments. We gathered around the table, the one I had sanded, stained, and sealed myself. I sat at the head. Mom took her usual place to my right. For a moment, it could have passed as any other holiday, chatter wine pouring the clink of silverware. But when the small bell I placed beside my plate rang out, the room went still. "I'd like to make a toast," I said, standing slowly. Not just to the holiday, but to truth, especially the kind that hides beneath beautiful renovations. Their faces shifted confusion first, then something closer to fear, as I lifted the tablet and tapped play. The living room speakers filled with familiar voices, Vanessa calling me a burden, Max discussing legal plans to remove me from the deed, and my mother's quiet agreement that Rachel's already served her purpose. The silence that followed was heavy. My father sat frozen, lips slightly parted. Max went pale and fumbled for his phone. My mother didn't speak. Not at first. Her eyes darted to mine, but I held my gaze steady. I funded every inch of this home's renovation. I continued pulling out the spreadsheet. $57, $450 in materials, labor, design, and project management. I paid for the trips, the meals, the repairs. I paid to stay included. Dad cleared his throat, but the words didn't come. "Mom," I said gently but firmly, "did you think I wouldn't notice the diverted travel funds, the payments to Richard?" At that, she finally broke. "Rachel, you're misunderstanding." I cut her off, not with anger, but with a simple truth. "I'm not misunderstanding. I've just finally stopped assuming." I turned to Dad now, visibly trembling. "Did you know about Richard?" He didn't answer, just stared at the floor, hands clenched. That's when I opened the final file email exchanges between Mom and Richard discussing next steps after full renovation and how to ease Rachel out without raising suspicion. Dad stood the chair, screeching behind him. "That's enough," he said, not to me, but to her. "How long has this been going on?" Mom reached for him, but he stepped back. "You used our daughter," he said, voice cracking. "You lied to me. For what? For him." The room erupted. Vanessa argued, Max deflected, Mom pleaded. But I didn't say much more. I had said what mattered, and now the performance was theirs to unravel. Eventually, I walked to the front door and opened it wide. "This gathering is over," I said calmly. "You can leave now." And one by one they did, except my mother, who remained seated, stunned. "Where will you go?" she whispered. I looked at her with a softness that surprised even me. "Somewhere I can finally stop proving I belong." And with that, I gathered my bag, my folder, and walked into the cold air of my own freedom. But the story wasn't over yet. Because freedom, I was about to learn, isn't just leaving behind what hurt you. It's learning how to live without needing it anymore. The next morning, the house was quiet, but it wasn't peaceful. It felt like something had been cracked open and left there raw and exposed. I returned briefly, not for drama, but to pack up what mattered: my tools, my documents, the blueprints I had drawn in better times. The table was still overturned from the night before. Glass shimmered like ice on the floor. I stepped over it, careful not to cut myself, not on the shards, but on the memories. My phone vibrated as I loaded my truck. It was my mother. The first message was rage. "How dare you ambush me in my own home?" The second was guilt. "You misunderstood everything." Then came the plea. "Please just talk to me." There were 14 messages in total, each one sliding from anger to desperation. I didn't answer any of them, because in the hours after truth explodes, People don't reach for honesty, they reach for control. I knew that if I replied too soon, I might fall back into the same trap, explaining softening, taking responsibility for pain I didn't cause. So instead, I sat in my new apartment. Bare walls, unpacked boxes, and a quiet I hadn't felt in years. Not silence, stillness. The kind that lets you think clearly without apology. Later that week, my father sent an email. It wasn't long, just a subject line that said, "I see it now," and inside a few words that broke me more gently than any betrayal, "I'm sorry. I should have protected you. Tell me how to make it right." It would take time to answer him, but something inside me softened at the thought that maybe not all ties need to be cut. Some just need to be rewired. That's when I made a decision. I forwarded my mother's text to my attorney, along with Vanessa's follow-up email offering to fix this privately. I wasn't seeking revenge, just space, just a clean exit from a system that had been quietly draining me for years. Because if there's one thing I'd learned, it's this: exposing the lie is only step one. Learning to live without needing their version of love, that's the harder part. And I was ready to begin, not with another confrontation, but with a conversation, one that I hadn't dared to have in a long time with myself. And that's exactly where the next chapter begins. There's this myth we carry, especially in families, that walking away is the end. That if you leave, you lose. But that's not what happened. Walking out of that house didn't feel like slamming a door behind me. It felt like opening one, a quieter one, a door that didn't creak with old guilt or slam shut behind new expectations. My condo was small, bright, and still half empty, but for the first time it felt like my space. No one had chosen the furniture for me. No one was waiting to comment on how minimalist my life looked. It was just me. And for once, that was enough. The first few nights were hard, not because I missed them, but because I missed the idea of them. The version of my family I had been loyal to for so long, one that maybe never really existed. I would catch myself cooking too much dinner or folding towels for a guest who wasn't coming. Habits take time to unlearn, especially the ones built on hope. So I turned to what I knew building. I carved out a little nook in the living room, brought in my drafting table, and reopened the blueprints I had been too emotionally drained to finish. This time, the designs weren't for my mother's kitchen or Vanessa's guest suite. They were mine, clean lines, strong foundations, no hidden costs. And that's where the healing started, not with therapy, not with closure, but with measuring tape and sunlight. I wasn't rebuilding a life based on who I needed to impress or prove something to. I was creating something I could stand inside without apology. That's a lesson I wish someone had told me earlier. You don't have to win the love you were never meant to chase. You get to create the peace they never gave you. And piece by piece, that's what I was doing. But life, as always, wasn't quite done with me yet. Because while I was setting boundaries, someone else was finally realizing they had crossed too many. And their message would be the one I never expected. It came on a Wednesday morning, an email from Vanessa. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" Just 3 words, but they landed with the weight of everything she hadn't said before. The message inside was long, filled with phrases like, "I didn't mean for it to go that far, and Mom let it, but I followed." She wrote about regret, about how family gets messy, about how Bruce, her husband, could still offer legal advice if I needed help protecting my company. It wasn't really an apology. It was negotiation wrapped in nostalgia. I forwarded the email to my attorney without replying. That's the thing about apologies born from consequence. They rarely carry truth. They're designed to reclaim access, not rebuild trust. And I'd learned to tell the difference. Forgiveness isn't a doorway, it's a boundary. You can forgive and still close the gate. You can mourn the relationship and still protect your peace. Later that day, my lawyer called. My father had reached out with news of his own. After reviewing the documents I'd shown him, he had decided to revise his will. Not out of spite, but because he said, "You're the only one who invested in this family," without asking for anything back. I didn't expect that. And I didn't ask for it. But I won't lie, it made something soften inside me. Not because of the inheritance, but because someone had finally seen the truth I'd been living all along. He asked to meet for lunch. Just the 2 of us. No drama, no ambushes. Just an overdue conversation between a father and the daughter he hadn't fully protected, but maybe, just maybe now, wanted to honor. I said yes. Because rebuilding doesn't always mean going back to what was. Sometimes it means starting fresh with someone willing to meet you in the middle. And that's exactly what came next. Not a return, a quiet, careful beginning. 3 months later, I stood in the middle of my living room, tape measure in hand, sunlight falling across the hardwood floor like a soft invitation. I wasn't building for anyone else this time. No clients, no family, just me. I had finally decided to redesign the space, nothing drastic, just enough to reflect who I had become. Warmer tones, open shelves, softer edges. Everything in this condo had been chosen with intention, from the chair that hugged my back while I sketched to the window that let in the morning light, right where I like to sit with my tea. People think starting over means burning everything down, but in reality, it often means quietly reclaiming the things you never realized you gave away: your time, your energy, your voice. I wasn't the same woman who once begged for inclusion at a dinner table she paid for. I was someone who could create her own table, and this time I would only invite those who brought peace with them. My father and I now met once a month. No big gestures, no apologies we didn't have words for yet. Just slow lunches, conversations about books and life and the way people change if you let them. It wasn't a perfect relationship, but it was honest, and that was more than I had hoped for. The biggest lesson I took from all of this: that love given freely is beautiful, but love given wisely is stronger. I still believe in giving, but I no longer believe that giving should cost you your sense of self. And now when someone asks me what I'm measuring, I smile. Because it's not just inches of drywall or table width. It's trust. It's boundaries. It's how much room I'm finally allowing myself to take up in the life I built, without shame, without apology, and most importantly, without needing anyone's permission. If you've ever sat at a table and felt like a guest in your own family, if you've ever poured your heart, your time, or your money into people who never truly saw you, and if you've ever had to choose between staying silent or standing up, this story was for you. You're not alone, and your story matters. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your experience, your quiet turning point, your moment of clarity. Let's build a space where strength doesn't have to shout to be heard. And if you believe more people need to hear stories like this, tap the like button, hit subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Because around here, we don't just tell stories, we reclaim them together.